Welcome to our Pokemon Pocket Breakout Decks of the Week. I've combed through thousands of tournament deck lists and pulled out some off-meta masterpieces that put up some solid results this week. Let's go ahead and dive on into some juicy details of some sweet deck lists. We kick things off with an Eevee Dragonite variation that had a 6-2 record in the tournament in which it was played. We see some typical things here that we've seen in other successful Dragonite lists, i.e. we've got a baby Articuno and a baby Zapdos as 100 HP single knockout point basics that you can put up front and take a little bit of damage with while you set up your powerful stage 2 in the back. But we have two Eevees with a singleton Jolteon and a singleton Vaporeon as potentially walls like the Articuno and the Zapdos, or alternative attackers as well. Jolteon in particular, I think, is a stellar Pokemon in the current metagame. It deals 80 damage on average, lets it clean up things like Mewtwo EX over the course of 2 turns a lot of the time, and notably all of the legendary birds like Moltres and Articuno are weak to lightning, meaning if you high roll even a little bit with Jolteon, a single 3 heads attack puts down that potent EX that a lot of decks want to be leading on right now. Our next deck list features Onyx and Marowak EX. It went 7-2 in the tournament that it was being played in. I think Onyx is a little bit of an underexplored card in Pokemon Pocket right now. At a glance, it looks quite poor, having a 70 damage attack for 3 energy. But when you think about it a little bit, how it compares to other things in the format, in a way, Onyx paired with a Brock is kind of like a stage 1 with a 2 energy attack that you can just power up the long way over 3 turns if you're missing your second card. You get 2 cards and 2 energy together, and you start attacking for 70 on the second turn of the game. There's also some nice high roll situations with Onyx, where if you lead on Onyx while going first, and happen to have 2 copies of Brock, you can Brock on 1, energy, and then Brock on 2, and start attacking on the second turn of the game when you're attaching your first energy. Marowak EX is probably one of the more powerful fighting finishers, dealing an average of 80 and letting you high roll 25% of the time to clear things like Mewtwo EXs or legendary birds in a single swing. Now, the upsides of this deck list is because it's playing a basic only and then just a stage 1, it has room to play all of the utility trainers. We get to max out on Sabrina's, Giovanni's, X-Speeds, and Potions, where a lot of decks normally need to pick and choose which of these cards they get to play 2 of. Up next, we have a Kabutops Machamp matchup that went 5-1-1 in the tournament that it was played in. I think these 2 Pokemon pairings complement each other quite well. Machamp needs more time to get going, needing 3 energies committed to it, while Kabutops needs just a single one, letting you put a minimal investment on it while you get up your secondary attacker set up in the backline. I also think Machamp EX complements Kabutops' other weakness quite well, which is that it gets one shot having only 150 HP into things like Mewtwo, while Machamp, despite being weak, can even live a hit there thanks to its hefty 180 hit point health pool. There is a singleton copy of Onyx as a 5th basic in here, which I think is a very reasonable addition, especially in tandem with the 1 copy of Brock that we see being played as well. Our next deck list is a Marowak Primape fighting deck with a twist that went 6-2-1 in the tournament with which it was being played. It notably features Golbat as a dark attacker that only needs colorless energy to attack, giving this deck a clean way to deal 60 for 1 in the Mewtwo matchup, which is something these fighting decks typically struggle with. In general, these utility type Pokemon that have only colorless requirements are neat utility to have in your toolbox when you think you're struggling into a particular matchup, like fighting often does with Mewtwo. Next up, we have an Arbok Greninja mashup that went 11-4 in the tournament it was being played in. Something especially interesting in this deck list is we see 2 copies of baby Mewtwo, but I would wager that this deck list does not want psychic energy in its pool. It's leveraging this high HP single knockout point Pokemon to be able to put that up in front and just take hits while you assemble your stage 2 evolution in Greninja, find the appropriate energy mixture in your 2-color deck, or simply poke down your opponent's backline with Water Shuriken while they chew through this chunky Pokemon that you can lead up front. Playing something like Baby Mewtwo is preferable to something like Snorlax as a colorless option, because Baby Mewtwo's retreat cost is only 2, meaning if your opponent is choosing to leave it up and it would be ideal for you to switch it out, you can actually reasonably retreat it, whereas Snorlax retreat cost of 4 leaves you completely at the mercy of your opponent choosing to knock it out as your active Pokemon. The utility trainers in this deck are super straightforward, with all of them being played as 2-ofs, but I think the Sabrina is especially noteworthy as a must-play 2-of in any deck with Arbok, in my opinion, because being able to switch something up and corner it as consistently as possible is quite a powerful combination. Another Greninja variation up next, this time featuring Jolteon as its secondary attacker. This went 5-2 in the tournament it was played in. I mentioned earlier that I absolutely love Jolteon as an attacker in this format. I think it makes a fantastical pairing with Greninja. Jolteon gives you such solid, aggressive openings into decks like Mewtwo and Charizard, and I absolutely love that this deck list has chosen Kangaskhan as its additional basic to give itself a tankier option into more aggressive decks like Pikachu or EX Starmie that would typically give Jolteon a little bit of a hard time, since its 90 HP breakpoint means that it can get KO'd itself in one against more aggressive starts. Up next, we have a Starmie EX Blastoise deck that went 8-3 in the tournament it was played in. I think this is a really interesting pairing for the Blastoise card. Generally speaking, we've seen Blastoise EX lead on tankier single knockout Pokemon, things like Kangaskhan and Articuno, and even Baby Mewtwo, to give itself time to build up in the back. Starmie EX can be that tanky starting line, having 130 HP on a stage 1, but it's also a card that can give you some really solid aggressive starts. It enjoys Misty, letting it attack a turn early, especially when you're going first, and sometimes it wins the game completely on its own. I also think Blastoise is sweet as a complement to Starmie EX's aggression, because its go big strategy can clean up things like a Charizard EX in a single hit that Starmie would normally struggle with as the game starts to go long in the games where it doesn't run away with things to begin with. Up next, we have another Starmie EX pairing that's sweet with Frostmoth. This deck list went 6-3 in the tournament that it was played in. I think this deck list is a sweet example of how Misty can be a card that adds consistency to your deck as opposed to strictly high rolls. Starmie EX and Frostmoth are both notably stage 1 Pokemon with a 2 energy attack, which means when you're going first, if you just get a single heads on a Misty, you can be attacking with these cards on that second turn of the game, essentially giving you a chance to reverse who had that first energy advantage in the game, thanks to Misty even hitting a slightly average occurrence. I think people focus on Misty being this incredibly high roll card alongside Articuno EX, which this deck is playing a singleton copy of, and they haven't explored it enough, simply being a way for you to kind of steal that going second advantage half of the time when you draw her. Finally, I wanted to close out on highlighting a couple of deck lists that repeated from last week's Breakout Decks Roundup. The first one of these is the Pidgeotto Melmetal deck, put up another tournament result, finishing 7-2 this week in one of the places where it was played. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't speak very highly of this deck list last week. I actually didn't bother giving it the time of day to play with it yet, but that's gonna change this week. Lightning looks to have struck at least twice, and I'm excited to get my hands on this and see how it feels. I would love to hear in the comments down below if any of you picked it up from last week and can give me some tips on things I should look out for when I'm taking it through the motions. Finally, the Greninja Mewtwo EX deck that we covered last week didn't just put up one more result, it's put up top finishes in a bunch of the community tournaments this week, with the sample list on your screen finishing 8-1 in a 1,000+ player tournament over the first day of their competition. I had a chance to play with this on my live stream, and I can see where the strength in this deck list is coming from. Kangaskhan, stellar front line that gives you time to build up things like your Greninja, but it also gives you time to organically just set up 4 energies on Mewtwo EX as a finisher. And the few things in this format that Mewtwo's 150 Blast isn't able to clear in one shot. When you pair it in tandem with Greninja's Water Shuriken and our copy of Giovanni, you can get up to clearing even things like a Charizard EX in a single go once your opponent moves their powerful finisher to the active spot. You kind of tie the whole room together with the fact that Mewtwo EX and Greninja are both happy attacking with some amount of colorless energy, and I genuinely think this is probably the best two-color deck we have in Pokemon Pocket right now. Thanks for making it through to the end of the video. Those that have been following my weekly tournament deck list rounds up here will note I did not start by drawing comparisons between the big popular decks in the format this week. Let's be honest, Mewtwo, Charizard, and Pikachu have small variations between them from week to week, but it's really more of the same, and I felt like it was getting a little bit of repetitive to hash that out every single week. So I think moving forward, I'll talk about the big, obvious, popular decks like that at the very start of a format, like when we get a new set. But as we get deeper on into things, I think the more interesting and fun part of these weekly roundups is highlighting the off-meta, potentially new breakout decks like that Mewtwo Greninja deck that are popping up to give folks at home and myself shiny new toys to play with in our Pocket adventures. I would love feedback if you think this is a reasonable format, or if you think having all those stats that have been very similar from week to week at the beginning really adds value. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and liking the video. Maybe you made it all the way through to the end. If you're not familiar with me, my name's Jeff Hoagland. I'm making Pokemon Pocket content here 7 days a week, roundups like this, sweet deck highlights covering things like these and others that I'm working on. I'd love to see you back here again sometime, and may your next pack be an excellent one.